Look, Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda. He was not setting up a religion. He didn't give, religious practices, by which I mean how meetings should be run, or meetings at all. I mean, he gave meetings in the sense he gave public talks, and where he was living, centres, communities. Obviously, he gave talks to the people that were there and visitors that came. But yeah, he did build a church. Yeah, he built churches. They were meant to be churches for all nations, and he had Kriyananda, leading the service quite often, and other people, of course. Yes, he did set up churches, that's true. Okay, I go a couple of steps further back. Lahiri did not. One of his disciples, Sri Yukteswar, well, yes, he had the view that you should be running organisations. He may have then meant including in that ashram, since I think that's the only organisation he was running, which was his own house, of course, his own home, but people could come and did on a continual sort of basis. They came as and when they wanted to. I don't think he was handing over teaching roles to people particularly. I think he just gave the talks, no doubt. Paramahansa said some things at times, being his right-hand disciple, so to speak. But if you go back to Lahiri, it was purely ashram, his own house. I mean, it doesn't look as though it was later set up as some, it was just his home, and that's where he was. And I think possibly in the later years he was not terribly communicative. I mean, he was deep in meditation, and people were so overawed by his presence that they were suitably affected anyway. I think he was the chap, I'm not certain about this, but I think he was the chap who would say to his disciples, one of the great masters, so to speak, he would say to his disciples, well, you speak and I'll give you the words as you speak. So he still didn't actually do the teaching. Yeah. But, come what may, and whatever the historical situation is, it's not really that important to me. What is important is what works, and what works is not organisations. I mean, organisations might preserve scripture more or less, and very often it's less because they wish to edit it and update it and change it and swear blind it was what the original was meant to be, or they've had a word from God as to what the original was meant to be, and so on. It doesn't really hold water. What does is what works. In other words, if you try something and you find it works, well, you're persuaded, aren't you? That's it, you're going to do it. Don't care what the arguments for and against are. It works and I'm going to do it because it achieves what I value. What is interesting is that Paramahansa says that Lahiri gave Kriya Yoga to any earnest seeker. Wow. I don't think he was laying down law about you have to have been ordained to do likewise. Various organisations tend to do that because that gives them, I think, a sort of substantial role, that they're the ones that are to pass on the teaching, nobody else. And of course, that gets more and more, as religions get further and further away from the inspiration, really, of what the founders were. And very often, of course, like in Christianity, the founders may not have been obvious. You know, I mean, we've got Jesus in the Christian tradition as being the founder, and the disciples, you know, who supposedly wrote Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, and then we decided that Paul was one of them as well, even though he wasn't there at the time. And the church has been largely structured on his teaching. And you come to the Jesus story and you find it's quite different to what Christianity is. It doesn't have all that theology stuff that mystifies the uninitiated and so forth. By which I mean the Pauline stuff, essentially, which was possibly not Paul. It was, may well have been Roman Church, you know. I don't mean Roman Catholicism, because that's something itself that's developed further and further over the next millennia and so on. No, to be spiritual is not to be religious. And religions strive to tell you that they're not religious. You know, you get key teachers in any religion that says he's not religious, he's spiritual, because he knows that spiritual is what really should be counting. It's just that it's a bit thin on the ground in the religion that he's now left with. So as with any helpful advice from any spiritual people, it's not to be structured. It's not to be turned into some religion. It's to be left as potential spiritual help, assuming they got it right, you know. And even if they got it wrong, but you find it's right, well, you're going to follow it, if that's what you find works for you. Until God has it otherwise. That's as it is, and I suspect, therefore, that's as it should be. And that doesn't result in some objective organisation becoming extant, not extinct, right? You know, being formed, that's then the target of ridicule, and everybody falls away from following God because its apparent supporters are religious hypocrites, and terrible things go on there, and all the usual problems of almost every organisation you meet, given a full enough passage of time. Nothing new here, is there? But to say, quite simply, no, we're not out to build a religion or a church or an organisation. We're out to bless people if we can. And structures and procedures typically end up being quite a handicap in that regard. You lose the freedom of spontaneity, you lose the freedom and the expressions of love and kindness and spontaneous action, spontaneity. Life, in fact, it loses its life and vitality when you turn it into an organisation, procedure, a creed, a dogma, a theology. Don't touch it. Don't touch it if you're wise. Just be your loving self that's looking to God, not certain of anything, except that you want God to really exist as your dearest friend, probably as in the Jesus story, your heavenly dad. But perhaps, like the chap I listened to this morning at this meeting, he definitely thinks of God as Divine Mother, probably because Paramahansa did. Yeah. But don't get lost in religion and end up wearing the right colour robes and the right bangles and, I don't know, the right manner. It all becomes so Monty Python in the end, doesn't it? Thank you, Heavenly Dad.